It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial complex in all its supersized Super Bowl SEO optimization. We're recording this on Super Bowl Saturday, I guess we call it, before Super Bowl Sunday. How you doing, Steve?
I am doing wonderful. It's Super Bowl weekend. It's a strange Super Bowl, of course, for Washington fans. In that it's a bit of a tough one to root for either team. We're recording this before the Super Bowl. You may hear this depending on when you listen before the game or after the game, depending on where you're listening. If I recall, I think we both picked the NFC Championship game correctly.
Yeah,
I know
I think you
did.
got both. You got the game. I still was clinging to the Buffalo dreams.
Were you? Yeah, that's right. And so we got to do this one here, of course, knowing that people may be listening to this possibly after the game is over, so we have to embarrass ourselves with this thing. So I'll go first to give you a second. So I think my rooting interest is in the Eagles because I cannot handle more Kansas City Chiefs faces and names and Taylor Swift and the wives and the podcasts, and I can't handle more of that. I just can't. And so I'm rooting for the Eagles, which is a bit odd for me, admittedly. But I don't think this is going to be a hugely high scoring game. So I'm thinking I'm going to change what I wrote on the site was 31-27. I think that's too high. So I'm going to go like 20. I'll go 28-20 Chiefs. Because while my rooting interest is the Eagles, I think Patrick Mahomes, man, he just comes through in moments like this, and the Eagles tend to not, a lot of times. And so all the numbers point to Eagles statistics, but somehow I just think Patrick Mahomes is going to come through, and Jalen Hurts won't. So
Nobody goes poor betting on Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, right. Rule. So while my rooting interest, I said it really poorly. Well, my rooting interest is the Chiefs because I can't, or the Eagles because I can't handle the Chiefs. I actually think the Chiefs are going to win.
I think one thing all NFL fans of neither of these teams can kind of rally around is how much this is an annoying Super Bowl to have any kind of rooting interest in, because even non-NFC East fans, hold a special place of disgust in their heart for the Eagles and their fan base
yes,
and their
everybody.
sanctimonious. They're both cranky, rude, and sanctimonious all at the same time.
It's an amazing trifecta.
So I'm rooting for. Here's how I describe my rooting interest in the game. I'm rooting for whatever team is behind as the fourth quarter starts.
You want to see a fantastic finish.
I want to see a good game. So, whoever is like a touchdown or two behind going into the fourth quarter, I'll be pulling for their next drive to score.
You're not singing "Fly Eagles Fly" though.
No. But I just, no one wants to be bored at the end of the Super Bowl.
Last year it went into overtime.
It was a good game. So, if we get regardless of who wins, we get a repeat of the last time these two teams faced. I'll be happy on Sunday. I actually was kind of on your anybody but the Chiefs, and at least the Eagles are known warriors that we have a history with. And then my Eagles Washington fan chains, the Eagles fans were so obnoxious going into like Wednesday or Thursday after they beat, and I was gracious. I said, good game. You guys are the better team. Basically everything I said in my prediction, right? But watch out. We're coming, all that stuff. And I'm getting memes, bad jokes for the entire week, just rubbing it in, even after being gracious. So that I was like, you know what? And I even said go Eagles to them because I was so anti-Chiefs, but their Eagles of not fans of noxious behavior, even ones that I consider friends, have maybe pushed me to rooting for the Chiefs.
I think the Eagles fan base is the archetype of bad fandom. They're rude, they're obnoxious, all that stuff you said. And it's not, they're not pro their team in a fun, energetic kind of way. They're just miserable. And I'm not even talking about like throwing batteries at Santa Claus, and like the fan that got arrested for throwing up on a child at a Phillies game, several years ago. All of that is horrible. I'm talking about the Joe average Eagles fan, is what you're describing. It's just awful.
They're
It's really hard
cultish.
for me. Yes,
They're cultish.
but I
Right.
can't root for the Taylor Swifts to win. I just can't see it. I can't see another Taylor Swift thing on TV.
I'm pretty bored of the Chiefs and holistically,
Yes.
but the so we'll see. I actually do. I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes, but I also can't pick against Chris Jones or Spagnola. I mean, they just that defense figures out in their defense is almost as clutch as Patrick Mahomes, and they're the perfect shield for Patrick Mahomes, in which they keep people in games and they can change games. So I think that combination is still undefeated.
Yeah, they shut Washington's offense
No,
down,
no, I'm talking
vaunted
about the
offense down.
Chiefs.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Like Spagnola and Chris Jones. I mean, they
But
figure out a way.
don't overlook the Eagles
No,
defense.
no, no. Of course, yeah. But
Yeah,
we just know that. I mean, if I think about the second regular season game and what Jaden Daniels was able to do against that defense, even turning the ball over 5 times. And those are some of the same skills as Patrick. You can just imagine Patrick Mahomes tiptoeing out on third and fourth and shorts all game long.
yeah. So I think so. It sounds like we're both on the same page. While it's the rooting interest is a bit tough on either side, we both think the Chiefs are going to pull it out because there's an X factor with Patrick
Until
Mahomes.
they don't, right?
I'm also rooting for the power in the stadium to drop off during the halftime show, so we don't have to see another washed up rapper for 15 minutes.
I don't know if I'd call him washed up. He just won the Grammy.
Nobody cares. Zero people care about the Grammys, Chris.
I mean,
Not
I,
one person cares about the Grammys except the
that,
Grammy voters themselves.
that is, I can rail against the Grammys all day long, but empirically that is incorrect in terms of the
There might have
ratings and
been
what they
people
do.
whose TV was stuck on that channel for some reason,
Okay.
and that's it. But the Grammys used to matter in that they used to give
No, no.
legitimate awards out to legitimate artists who are worthy and celebrate all genres of music. And now
That's
it's
where you're
just
wrong.
pop
That's where you're
music.
wrong. They were never legitimate. There's no go
At
and
one point in time, 30 years
no,
ago,
they
they
were
were
it
fairly
is
legitimate.
they're never have been legitimate. Go look at years of like the 50s and 60s
Are
about
you
what
telling
was
me that the fact that Jethro Tull got the heavy metal award isn't legitimate?
no that in fact and that's in anybody's short list. But now how long ago was that? 35 years?
Something I wouldn't swear to the year. That maybe I
It
don't think
was
it
a
was quite
chunk of
that
time
long, but it was a
ago.
long
It
time
was a
ago. Yeah.
yeah. So and I'm even
What I'm saying is though, what I remember is decades ago, you didn't see every pop star of the day featured on the Grammys. It was always there were some more serious artists there, and now there's none of them. It's just the latest pop
it's just a
star of the
TV.
day.
That's just a TV The Grammys
Yeah,
broadcast is a TV concert. They don't even they don't even hide that fact.
they used to hide it though. That's my point.
Well,
They
they used to
used to
just do it differently. I don't think they
right
hide it, hid it. But I've actually been. I've been to the pre-tell, which is actually where they
because you've
do
told us
that.
before that your wife is loosely in the
Yeah,
industry. Yeah,
well, more than loosely. But
I was trying to hide the
yeah.
your personal life, but okay.
But if you go to the pre-tell, that's what you would have watched on the Grammys in 1991.
That is my point. That's what I'm getting
So they
at.
just, but yeah, but I don't think that's not like a hidden thing. They just pushed all the awards to non-television. But that's where they're still giving away like best solo in jazz recording and best packaging of a reissue and even best contemporary blues and best contemporary rock. That's where the majority of the awards are given out on that pre-tell.
But and they don't even the voters are bad. They don't even know who half the people are nominating. Obviously, Jethro Tull is not supposed to win heavy metal artists, for example, which is
If
probably the most famous one. But there's a slew of those type of nominations every year.
if you if you take EGOT as a thing, which is now we're getting ephemeral, and these are even things at all, but EGOT, which is Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, right? So there's some artists that there's a handful of artists that have filled out their EGOT. The G is by leaps and bounds the most fraudulent of those four awards.
I agree with you totally there. And like the Oscars are very frou-frou and shoo-shoo. Yeah, like they're never going to nominate and give awards to like popular,
Well, they sort of they
crowd
expand
pleasing.
when they expanded. Now they can do up to 10 films of the year, and those they don't necessarily win, although we'll see
Well,
one
that's what I'm
eventually.
saying.
But
Win
they get
of they
nominated at
don't.
least.
Yeah, they don't win though. It's always some art film that nobody's heard of, or seen that wins. So I think the Oscars are the most obnoxious and highbrow. The Grammys are just ridiculous. And I don't watch the Tonys. I can't speak to that at all. I don't
Well,
know.
they're probably the most legit. They're the probably because it's the
Are
smallest
they?
market that no one, the thing
No
that
one
at least
knows.
probably has the most stringent, and you could probably has the most rigor and honesty in their process.
Because the Broadway fans know what they're watching, and that's about it.
Yeah, right. It's more legitimate. Well, and then all of this is, and we'll transition on quickly because I'm sure this is not people's interest, but then you get to the fact that you shouldn't, awards for best of and artistic endeavors are stupid to begin with.
Oh, yes.
So, why are we giving awards on taste?
And it's a lot of times it's just what production company has lobbied the voters the most.
Yeah, and that's actually where the Oscars are the most corrupt. All right.
Yes.
All right. So yes, awards are dumb. That is the central opinion there. But what it isn't dumb, or maybe it's dumb to the tune of billions of dollars, is the Super Bowl. Which is kind of everything. The Super Bowl is so big, it's everything. It's a behemoth. So Front Row Sports, through their Memo newsletter, which is, if you care about this stuff, is probably worth signing up for.
It's really good.
They broke down. I think the person who put together was this dude, Colin Salalo. Apologies. And they put together some good charts that I think all go back to, well, they don't all go back to the same time, but they reach back. It depends on the chart, anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 years.
The
And they
column
look
was called Super Bowl 60 in charts, big figures behind the big game, dated February 2nd.
right. So I'll just go over them and then we'll dive in. But they basically look at viewership numbers, ticket prices, cost of hotel room in host city, cost of commercial per ad spot, 30-second ad spot to be specific, the gambling and betting on the game, and both the sort of like top tiered salary look at this year's participants, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. One, this is just a great way to digest information, and I thought they did a really effective job with sort of the infographics, charts, parts of this. It also really lets some of these things sink in. And my big takeaway looking across these is the small fluctuations from year to year aren't really that important, or can be explained with lots of localized reasons at each data point. But the overall trend is up, up, up on all metrics.
Well, yeah, that is the trend. And if you do statistical analysis of these, what you will see is a continually rising trend, like you said. And yes, there have been some down years in viewership. The down years in viewership are probably more than due to bad games than anything. And what it doesn't, what the chart doesn't go into in terms of viewership is how many of these, like for example, last year 2024, 124 million viewership. Oh, game winning overtime. 2 years prior, 3 years prior, 96 million, which would have been 2021. I don't remember what game that was, but what it's not going into is how many of those are viewers for the entire game. How many of those is that just any TVs that turn on the game at any point, in the broadcast? That doesn't really go into it, but I suspect that there's some criteria like that, based on how long they're viewing, because of the dips that sort of coincide with the games. Last year 123.7 million, up 7%, which was over the last year. It's 115 million on Fox. So it's I think it seems to me that the ratings, yes, it's an upward trend, but it's also tied a little bit to how the quality of the game itself. But I don't know what they're measuring in here.
Yeah, we don't. They don't go that deep into their methodology. Although, I think they probably because they probably applied the same methodology.
Well, the Nielsen's go into this though. They do have a metric for
Oh
how
yeah,
many
they
people
definitely do.
watch the whole thing versus
Yeah,
they turn it off, and this chart does not go into that. And I
this
would be curious about that.
this
And the
chart
other
is
thing,
charting the composite of those things and how they were defined from
right?
2000 onward.
And if you notice, the big major new ads are all loaded at the front.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like the high profile advertisements. By the time you get to the fourth quarter, those are over, and obviously there's a reason for that. Um, now
I
what
mean, but
what's
there are
interesting.
also societal trends here too. Like, so actually, if you look at that, what would it be? The 2001. That's the first post-COVID Super Bowl. So, that's the 2001 Super Bowl. The one in 2020 would have happened before the majority of the outbreak. So that probably explains that as much as anything
Well,
for
here's
that
what I
year.
think is interesting about this chart. If you go to the early 2000s, between 2000 and 2005, the high watermark was 90 million. The low watermark was 84. And so they're averaging kind of in the high 80s. Well, last year, they found an additional 36 million people. Where did those people come from? Did the population of the United States, the number of households in the United States increase by that much? Is this just due to the rise of streaming and the rise of the many different ways you can watch this game? Because it was really kind of in the 2010s that, according to this chart, where it really went up. 2015, 115 million. And I bet you if we went backwards another 20 years, we'd see ratings a lot lower than the 88 million. And so I'm just curious, is it because of the rising population of the United States, or is this because of the rising number of different ways to watch the game? And these are a composite.
One Probably the latter. One thing I know that has, I don't know if inflated is the right word, that maybe has pushed these numbers higher is I know one of the formula tweaks that they've done is they've got, I don't know what it is, but they've got some formula for how they factor group viewing in restaurants and bars that then adds to the overall total.
I think we
So
mentioned that in a story a couple of
yeah,
weeks
so
ago.
like if so they have a formula like one Buffalo Wild Wings equals 50 viewers or whatever, right? And then if it was broadcast, there's whatever 300 Buffalo Wild Wings nationwide, there's a guarantee they're all watching the Super Bowl. So some of that is exactly what you say so some of it, so now where 10 years ago they may not have captured that, now that formula also captures group viewing in commercial establishments. So some of it is just they have their thumbs on some of these scales to
Well, I
some
think it's
degree.
that, and I also think that the Nielsen's themselves are a lot more accurate.
Yes,
We've gone from literally filling out a piece of paper and writing down what you watch to all these streamers and cable companies allowing the Nielsen's to basically spy on you and see what you're watching.
and don't think that they're getting one over on these big advertisers, because the big advertisers also know that for the price they pay and the broadcast on the Super Bowl, this year on Fox, but it's gonna, it trades hands between the networks with the big TV contracts. That means you also see it downstream. That same commercial generally runs on your phone, and blah blah blah. So like
They're
you
usually
get like a much more
centerpieces of
diverse
a major
package.
marketing campaign.
Yeah. So you get a lot more places for your one ad buy to actually show up. So yeah, and they'll always need to figure out how to count this.
So I think then, so to summarize that, because I think it's interesting. So it sounds like the 3 points that are the cause behind the steady increase in viewership, I think in descending order of importance, it seems to me, are the rise of streaming, the refining of the way the Nielsen's are counting, and then to a lesser extent, the increased population in the United States.
I actually think your other reason is probably my third, is that we've actually, because we're old enough to remember when this was actually aggressively the non-norm. We've gotten actually pretty lucky in the kind of modern era, let's call it the last 15, 20 years, kind of
Good
similar
football games.
with the games.
Yeah.
Like when we were growing up, and then even into our kind of like
Seems like
early
they were
mid
always
adulthood, that
blowouts.
was a joke, right? That was
Yeah.
the thing. So that's why you'd want to be in the first quarter, because at least in the first quarter you don't know what you get the most eyeballs, because if it's a dog by halftime, then people are bouncing after the performance, and then but now that's not the case. We get good Super Bowls.
Yeah, which is odd. I don't know what the basis of that is, but we have had a string of good Super Bowls. So yeah, that we should have mentioned. So there's four reasons.
Yeah.
And I would probably put that above the rise in population. I'd probably make that three, and the population increase probably number four.
Right, because part of their formula is also audience sustainability. So it does matter if you can, now it's everything dips towards the end of anything, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
But if you're sustaining, they have a way to calculate that. So the sustaining the audience.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And these numbers don't go into that, but somehow this is
a viewer counts more in the fourth quarter in their formula, probably.
Yes, and they just don't explain what the formula is on this chart. Okay, so ticket prices.
Little easier to get the data.
Yeah, and so back in 2015, average ticket price $4,678. In 2025, 7,388, which is interestingly a dip, a pretty significant dip from last year, which was 9,163. Now, years ago, it was a lot. There's a decidedly more a greater upward trend than it appears on this chart over a longer period of time. Years ago, like the face price on a ticket was less than $1,000. I used to sign up. The NFL used to have a means where regular fans could sign up for the chance to buy tickets. You would just give them an email address, and then they had basically a lottery, and I would sign up every year. I never got called, but the face value was, again, like, I wouldn't swear to the number, it was something less than $1,000. But these numbers, you're going for free or you have a lot of money, But I would suspect this chart does not go into enough detail. It doesn't have enough years involved. I suspect it's a very, very steep increase over like 20 years.
Even in this, which is 2015 to 2025, so a 10-year arc on this particular one.
A double over the high water mark.
I would say there's two times recently where they set it. So the absolute low water mark actually was 4 years into this chart, which it looks like 2019 was 30,900 and change.
That would probably win in 2018.
Is that one? Yeah.
The third.
My eyesight isn't good, and they give.
I had to get my tablet out because this chart is tiny. So
19, you got below 4,000, which had been the first time in 3 or 4 years. Like when this chart starts, the price is 4,600. So that's the basement right there, 3,900. But it goes to 6,400 in that next jump, and so to me, there's a new high water mark at the time. Ticks up, kind of troughs. Again, there's probably some COVID numbers in there.
Well, interestingly enough, 2021 was another high watermark of more than $7,000, and that is the COVID year.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can see it better than you because I have a big one. Good. So the low watermark was 3,771, which was 2017. Then 18 was 4,100. 19 was 3,900, and then the second, and then 2021 was 7,100, which is COVID year.
And then we hit last year 9,000. But even as we come down this year down to 7,
it's still another high.
Yeah. Now we're just sustaining what. Now we've sort of established what kind of average to bad is, and that's.
And if you do statistical regression analysis to this, what you see is a decided upward trend, because the trend ignores these peaks and valleys and whatnot, and you're seeing an upward trend. And again, I suspect if you go back to 2000, it's a really steep trend, would be my guess. Because again, I just remember, less than $1,000 for face value. And also, I don't think it doesn't really say what they mean by these prices. Is this secondary market prices?
I think it's got to be.
It has to be, I would think,
because the secondary market is the market nowadays. Like this idea that these are separate are almost a joke.
Well, but because the NFL again does release some tickets to the general public. A lot of these tickets are handed out by the NFL to sponsors and stuff, and clearly some of them flip them. Because you could, I would assume you could, if you wanted to, today, Saturday, go buy 2 tickets to the Super Bowl tomorrow. if you want to drop enough money on it, and because it's a secondary market ticket still. And this says the data is from something called Tick Pick, which I've never heard of, but that's what they're citing in this chart is Tick Pick.
So the other chart that really couples with this one is the cost of the hotel room by
Sheesh.
local city, which set a high water mark last year at 747 coming out of the
in
sky.
Vegas.
And then everyone's talking about the downturn this year, but 650 in this chart going back to 2015 would be the second highest. So again, we're still establishing new floors and ceilings all the time, and that trend is up. And with both of these charts, ticket price and hotel room, and these are hand in glove, it has to be said, last year was Las Vegas. This year's New Orleans, which normally,
another party town.
Yes, but with a recent terrorist attack. So and New Orleans still doesn't have that kind of modern infrastructure that Las Vegas does.
Well, there has been some chatter about whether New Orleans really is big enough and sophisticated enough to handle a Super Bowl in today's world. I've seen some story. Yeah, we consider a story like that, but so still,
you consider those two cities in the reality. But you're still talking about New Orleans being, this Super Bowl still being at the top of this trend chart on both.
That's my point. That's my point. Yeah. It's, and again, this chart does not go back 20 years. It just goes back 10 years. But from 2015 to 2019, you're averaging in the 300s. The price has literally doubled in 5 years. So and the peak, look at 2021 was the low watermark 249, but it has risen dramatically, hugely over it's more than doubled in 5 years. It's tripled almost in 5 years. Almost, not quite, but almost.
And this one has the most variable in terms of the local economy, right? Because you also are starting from different local economies based on city. So that's wildly different.
And New Orleans is an expensive hotel city because it's a party city, as is
they go to Tampa, which I think was the lowest hotel, and which people do visit Tampa, but it's not optimized like a Vegas or New Orleans.
It's not a go-to location, for well-off people to go hang out and party.
Although they're trying hard to make it one of my Hulu advertising attest. So we're going to skip commercial for a second and jump to, we're going to end with that one as we kind of transition into what that says at a bigger level. But the one chart where you do not necessarily have the historical record on, and that shows probably the kind of most eye-popping growth, which is pretty remarkable given all the growth here, is the big game betting, at least to me. The bar graph chart looks like a grand staircase.
Yeah. So what are these numbers here? So the numbers are in billions of dollars bet. 2021, 4.28 billion. 2024, 23.1 billion. But there's an obvious reason why.
Yeah.
And which we did on this show, which is that the Supreme Court struck down the federal law that prohibited betting in around the country, except in Nevada and New Jersey. And so once that happened, that was the huge rise of online betting, Prize Picks, DraftKings, all those things. And as we talked about in the show many times, the NFL has gotten in bed with these people. The NFL has gone from abhorring any connection whatsoever with gambling to
gambling houses will be first quarter commercials.
Yes, absolutely. The NFL has gone to embracing it. And so I don't think this is a surprise. I would have, of all of them, I would have guessed this big of a jump for all these things.
We don't. Oh, yes. If you want to look at if any one of the charts here by Front Row Sports tells a story of cause and effect story, it's this one, right? We understand what the Big Bang was. But the other interesting part is we just never know. 2021 and obviously before, there's also a gray number we don't know, because now
the illegal gambling is
illegal gambling, right? Yeah. So it's like you would probably see some. I think you'd still see a stepward up for sure. because just the ease, the access, legitimacy, all that is driving numbers. Yes, but if you could wave a magic wand and know what the illegal gambling was, it would be interesting to map to these changes.
And I think what Chris is talking about is we're not talking about like the bed in the house with the squares between the
No,
neighbors.
no,
What
no. I
he's
mean
talking about
bookies,
is the bookies. There were a
organized
lot
crime.
of there were a lot of online organized crime or overseas in the Virgin Islands or either Bahamas or somewhere.
Or even a guy
It,
down your block, that
yeah,
you knew from high
right,
school.
right. And that's really hard to measure,
Yeah.
obviously. This is
So
just legal gambling, but it's just exploded over. So that the trend is the trend it really and truly the trend has actually gone down a little bit because if you look 2021 4.28 billion 2022 7.61 billion and so that is an increase of 80-90% there and then 22 to 23 is 7.61 to 16 billion which is more than 100% increase and then 23 to 24 16 billion to 23 billion that is less than 50%, so it's actually kind of starting to level off a little bit.
I actually think my prediction, if we were to chart like what is this, basically a 3 or 4 year
four
span here,
years
4 years, if we were to chart the next 4 years, I think you'd probably see some kind of plateauing, and then I think you'd actually start to see a tick down.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where I was leading to because there's a limit to how many people want to do this. Like I'm not a personally, I just don't like gambling because I'm cheap, and and there's a lot of people that just aren't going to do it, and so they're going to hit the peak of how many people want to participate in gambling on sports.
Well, and also there'll be people exiting that ecosystem because they have to, right? I mean, we're
Because
also
they're
going to see
broke.
this. I mean, and I'm no, what did I used to call myself, Captain Vice or whatever. But
Yeah, you did, didn't you? Yeah, I forgot
so
what you said.
but what we're about to see probably in the next 4 years is a pretty massive. If you start looking at the data, and this is mostly, not exclusively, but mostly a male problem. If you look at the data of problems that legalized gambling is having on families, on men's wealth, on all those sort of societal measures, we're going to start seeing some cliffs. And so we're probably about to go into the how do we deal with the gambling epidemic part of this conversation over the next 3 or 4 years, which I think will probably even and start to decline some of this. But again, in that scenario, I'd be love to see the gray economy of gambling side by side because that's your real number.
It brings up an interesting question, I think, which is, you used to call yourself Captain Vice or whatever. I forget what you said, but where you were really going with that, I think, is it the government's job to regulate morality, and this comes into regulation of, to a certain extent, regulation of illegal drug use a little bit, but at gambling also because there's literally a division of major police departments called the Vice Squad.
Yeah, it's what sex, professional sex, or
It's
sex as a
primarily
service,
professional sex, but also
drugs,
drugs.
and
Right.
gambling. It's basically those are
Yes.
the vices.
And so is it the government's job to regulate morality? Probably depends on who you ask. I would say probably not, but it is the government's job to keep society safe, and all of that. And so I think that's where the drugs come in. But the gambling, people get in trouble, people get addicted. What you're getting at is, people. It's real easy to do it now. People are going to spend a ton of money and get in trouble. We're going to get to Ohtani, for example, later in the show, the Dodgers pitcher.
Cartoon version of this.
Yeah, right, right. And so the reason why gambling was prohibited under federal law was basically Vice Squad at a really high level. They're regulating morality. Should the government be doing that? I think that's a serious political question that people differ on.
And if you ride shotgun to the morality question here, the question that shotgun question is really then who's paying for the fallout.
Well, it depends on what the fallout is.
If the fallout's broken families, more welfare rolls expand. I mean, we're seeing kind of numbers that you could actually chart cause and effect on these things.
Sure. And I think generally speaking, you're seeing a downturn in marriages. a
Right, right.
downturn
All
in
kinds of societal
childbirth.
metrics. Yeah.
Right. And so at some level, the government needs to advocate for a strong future society, and is part of the way to do that to regulate the things that are tearing apart society, or is it just the job of the government to leave the freedom to choose to the people and let things fall where they may? I mean, that we don't have an answer. I'm saying that's really the question.
Legalize gambling and its boon and fallout is an very interesting petri dish for this question.
Yes, absolutely so. And it's not a question again. I mean, I have opinions. Everybody has opinions, but I think it might be in a macro sense, other than, the fear of nuclear war or something, it might be the most serious question facing a society. How in what way is the future going to be developed on a macro level?
Oh,
I'm not just talking about just gambling. I'm talking about all these questions kind of put
yeah,
together
yeah.
lead to whether or not you have a strong society.
This one is just the easiest. I mean, a lot of those debates can get esoteric fast.
Yes.
This one gives you like parameters in which most people can digest the issues.
Because you're
Government
saying
makes
it exactly
changes in
right.
laws, things happen. How do we deal with what comes next?
This huge rise in online gambling means there's people like you and me, average people sitting around, and they're putting a butt ton of money into gambling. Some people can afford it, a lot of people can't. And then, like you said, if you spend the rent money or the mortgage money trying to chase the high of winning football betting, that's going to ruin households.
Most studies say, I mean, making generalizations here, but I'm pretty confident that most studies say that most Americans, up into and including upper middle class households, if traumatic events happen, have about 6 months, where they could coast or whatever. So massive job loss, health, but the fallout from gambling and or drugs, or sex, so the expanded legality of vice will play, will drive those things potentially. So it is a super interesting societal question. Nanny state, non-nanny state, whose responsibility is to pick up the crushed lives. But if we understand that most Americans, up to including upper middle class, only have a certain amount of time they can coast when catastrophe happens in their family finance, then gambling fallout becomes a driver of that.
Did you see 6 months in some kind of study, or did you just throw that out there as an
I've
example?
seen it various things. Like I said, I'm aggregating my being involved in these worlds multiple years. Can I find that study right off the top of my fingers? No, but I bet you if I spent some time and looked it up, I would be
So it's
validated.
somewhere in the ballpark, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, of reality. Yeah, no. It's and so then the question becomes: is it the government's job to regulate morality, which leads to vices, which leads to broken families, or is it the government's job to leave the freedom of choice to the people itself, while knowing you may ruin your society over the long run by doing it?
No. It's a spicy meatball, as they say.
Yeah, it's above and beyond sports business, sports law and business for sure.
But the gambling one, I think, really plugs
It's
this
the
socket into the wall.
It really does. And look at it. I mean, again, there is a almost 600% increase in sports betting over the last 4 years. And we don't know. Yeah. That's it's 500 and it's almost 600%. That
And
is a huge number.
and the cats are getting fatter by pushing this, right? So there's also what's the responsibility of private industry here that is benefiting, but then also pushing.
We went from the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball not even wanting to have a team in Las Vegas, not even wanting to be physically located there, from them, all of them embracing and getting into business deals with gambling, with companies that are doing gambling.
While they
That
got
is
the highest hotel rate, the
highest
highest
ticket
ticket price.
prices.
Yeah.
And I bet you could find a prop bet on ticket prices if you wanted to
Oh, I'm
somewhere.
sure. That probably wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah.
All right. So quickly, we'll do a
Deep,
quick.
deep, deep thoughts from It's
Yeah.
Just Business today.
Well, we'll get back to stupid. The
We'll get to Ohtani later.
yeah, right. Uh, quickly look at. I find it interesting. They kind of give you kind of like a top level look at like the salary and roster construction for each of these teams, and it just reminds me. And if you want to know why the Chiefs are in this game every year, they just have Patrick Mahomes on the smartest contract. I mean, that's going to look like one of the smartest contracts in history.
So I did a deep dive into the Patrick Mahomes contract. I wrote a column I never published about it. Um, it's what it is it's a 10-year deal, 450 million, but it's got a series of uh bonuses that become vested 2 years out all along the way. And so while it's not a fully guaranteed contract, it is structured in such a way that it would be very, very difficult for them to get rid of for them to get rid of him if they wanted to. So while yes, it's smart, but it's smart because he worked out, because he didn't get hurt, because he didn't get
Their
something
bet
stupid
paid off.
happen to
They
him.
had to. There was risk, but
It was an
they won it.
enormous amount of risk. That the opposite end of that is the Deshaun Watson contract, which is fully guaranteed. I forget how many years, 5 years, enormous number, and obviously that's blown up in spectacular fashion. So the Chiefs bet on the right person, but other teams have bet on the wrong person. And so so it just goes to show how much talent evaluation and coaching really matter here. Andy Reid has developed many quarterbacks. He's probably the most successful uh, overall coach still left in the game now that Bill Belichick's out of the NFL, probably by far. And look what he's done. Look what he's developed. It goes to show that um, that success on a multi-year level for especially football teams is not just the draft. It's not just free agency. It is a top-down construction of from ownership on down. That is what makes a successful team. And in the case of Kansas City, look at the stars. They list them here in this column. We're still in the same column, by the way. Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, the defensive tackle, Jawan Taylor, Creed Humphrey, Travis Kelce. That's the core and they hit on every single one of them. Then take a team like Washington, which is the total opposite up until this year.
Yeah, well, now they have the chance to do something.
Right, this year is different.
The road in
right.
front of them they should learn. So anyway, we're not going too deep into the football, but I did think that was interesting. So we kind of transition with cost of commercial. This is again a 30-second, standard 30-second Super Bowl ad spot. I think that's anywhere from the 30 minutes before kickoff to the 30 minutes after kickoff kind of range. The average spot is hitting a new high water mark of $8 million per 30-second spot. That's a very steady incline, but coming off of two static years where it was 7 million. The thing that jumps off to me about this chart, that even just the eyeball test, even just looking at the space between dots, is that even in a year where some of the narrative is that ratings are down, we saw since 2015 we saw the biggest per spot jump in the history of this chart, and when it went up a full $1 million for that 30-second ad.
First of all, I'm pleased to announce that the Hogsty has paid the $8 million and will be running an advertisement during the Super Bowl. So keep an eye out for that. It's Alex Zeese with a bottle of whiskey ranting for 30 seconds. That's what the advertisement is. Now, what I'm looking at, I think, is different than what Chris is looking at. The column I pulled up while he was talking was from CNBC Sports. Super Bowl ads backing up to $8 million a piece for Fox by Lilly and Rizzo. That does not have the chart in it that you're talking about. So, Chris, do you have the site for?
No, I'm in the same front row column. It's right after hotel.
I'm looking at CNBC. Okay, you're looking at the front row column. Okay, yeah. So
they have the cost of commercial chart.
Okay,
it's after hotel room.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Um, again, almost doubled over 10 years. So that is a much lower trend than the betting one, the gambling one. Notice this trend here is about along the lines, which is no accident, of the trend in ticket prices and the trend in viewership. You know, maybe a little bit steeper, but it's about like that. Um, I have to think that this is due to I mean, it's tied to ratings, primarily. It's almost exclusively tied to ratings, really. And so then you tie in the expanded viewership because of streaming and all other things, and the downstream, the trickle down cause and effect of this is that the cost of commercials is going way up.
Yeah, Coors Light or Ford or DraftKings or
Or the
whoever's
hog's
buying.
eye.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoever's buying that ad, they know down to the penny what they're buying, right? These aren't drunk bets.
Well, in the case of Alex Zese's,
Right, yes.
that one is a drunk bet.
What and so, in some of the explainer copy, I love that they call out that even with the adjusted for inflation price, the cost of an ad in Super Bowl one, right? So run it all the way back and adjusted for inflation, that cost of that 30-second ad in Super Bowl one was only
Can you
375
believe that?
3,000. So even in today's money, it was, I don't even can't even do the math. It was a fraction of the 4 million of in 2015.
Oh, that's like almost 2,000% increase. Yeah, right off the top of my head, because 100% increase would be, and so then that's 1,000 would be in the 7 million range, and so it's more than a 2,000% increase. Um,
Yeah, I think the explainer copy in this article does a good job of giving you some of this context that where even the chart can't, so like the other little like info nugget they give you in the text is that Apple's famous 1984 ad, which was a Super Bowl ad, in today's money was only 368,000. So one of the most iconic ads of all time was in that same, less than 2,000% of
but
2015
even
prices.
adjusted for inflation, 1.2 million.
Oh, that's right. I was reading it wrong. Right, 1.2 million.
Yeah,
So still,
368 was the
yeah,
actual cost at the
yeah,
time. Um, I guess this is paying off.
yeah.
It must be. That's such you can't just run an advertisement at this cost just to sell more widgets.
Well, they're usually
It has
larger
to be the
ad
start.
campaigns.
It has to
Yes.
be a start of a larger ad campaign that is going to change the tone of the corporation in the eyes of the public. Because again, this is not just come to Target and please buy more Target branded, underwear and socks or whatever. That's not what these. You don't spend this kind of money on an advertising campaign like that.
It's a preview of the ads that you'll be sticking pencils in your eyes that you have to watch by next fall.
I'm usually not impressed by the ads. I usually don't watch them, to be honest. I'm not. There's a group of people out there who think the Super Bowl ads are the be all end all of, and it's part of the, mystique of the Super Bowl. I haven't heard a lot of that this year. I haven't paid a lot of attention though. It seems like the talk about the advertisements is way down this year.
I think that
Um,
benefits them in the long run. Yeah.
Oh, I definitely do. Absolutely. Because like last year seemed to be the high watermark. Like the ads had been, everybody had
Yeah.
already
Watch
seen
the
the,
full run on YouTube on Friday evening.
yeah. What's the fun in that? So this year it's not, it seems like there's been a conscious effort by the advertising agencies who put these out to keep the ads to themselves, which is very, very smart. But my point is, you don't spend $8 million on an ad unless you're starting an entirely new advertising campaign to get an entirely new point across to the product buying public.
Yeah. It's a release moment, not like just an airing.
Except if you're Alex East who bought the
Yeah.
Hogstye ad and it's just
It would be memorable.
yeah.
Well, that kind of transitioned us a little bit to actually, I think still a couple of front row sports or articles, but this stuff is, also kind of covered everywhere to some degree. These next two things in that both Disney and Fox had some earning reports come out that, tell a similar story. They have obviously stories for each of those big companies that are a little bit divergent or whatever, or have their own unique details. But what I found, you always look at what they're talking about. And what both network, well, media companies really were talking about was that in Disney's case, ESPN, and in Fox cases, Fox Sports, are right now their crown jewel earners. And that lot and it kind of some of the starkest data so far that live sports is a huge driver in these media campaign strategy and profits.
So the one he's talking about, I believe, is another front office sports thing. Fox reports big sports profits eyes new streaming service. This is by Eric Fisher, David Ramsey, and Colin Saleo again. And if you all notice, by the way, the same group of like 4 or 5 people are churning out all these front office sports things. Um, okay, so this quarter, Fox has reported a 20% boost in overall revenue to 5.1 billion for the second year quarter, which fiscal quarter, which for them is October through December. Net income doubled to 388 million. It's the second straight robust period, following a strong first period. Some of this is the election. They acknowledge that advertising during the election season, obviously, but they're citing some different things. Improved Major League Baseball postseason viewership, the impact of Yankees Dodgers, which I think whether or not you like either one of those teams, the two most iconic teams in baseball, for sure. Because it goes all the way back to the 50s.
Biggest audience in 8 years.
Yeah, right. What we just got through talking rising prices for ads during the NFL games. The viewership actually went down a tiny bit, like 2% this year in the regular season. That's just a blip. That's not a real dip that means anything. And the NFL doesn't think it means anything. Ad prices went up. College football.
Yeah, and more games meant more money. What we talked about 2 weeks ago.
If ever, what we didn't talk about this year and with college football is that they had a lot more games on different days.
Yeah, they got to find new real estate.
Yes, exactly. And they got to fit it in between football and stuff. They had games on Fridays, which used to only be reserved for high school games. They had some games in the middle of the week on like Wednesday and Thursday and stuff here and there. And so they're doing what the NFL is doing, which is expanding the calendar. And I do think that, which I've said many times, at some point you go too far. I think the NFL is starting to spread itself a little bit too thin, and college football isn't, but they could get to that point. So it goes into venue sports, which we've already, I think beat a dead horse on about venue, which died.
But they did take that moment, basically Fox, not to say this article, but Fox to say, hey, we are getting into streaming here. Not real concrete plans, but they've been the kind of holdout, and they do not admit's not the wrong word, but they do say, hey, we might be the last strong audience for traditional cable, and that's still doing well for us. But they're kind of the last out on the plank here on the streaming service.
Well, sure, if you think about it, CBS has Paramount, NBC has Peacock, ABC has Disney Plus. Fox doesn't have anything.
A piece of Hulu or whatever.
Yeah,
but not as much anymore. Even I think, yeah.
And
it's mostly Disney.
In one of these other columns, which I'll find, I've got now two devices in my hands here, but they're getting in bed with Tubi. Like the Super Bowl this year is broadcast on Tubi, among other things. But the point is, that's not Fox Plus, or some branded thing like that. You have to hunt down Fox. And so what they're saying here is that, and I don't know what column it's in, maybe you can find it here. I think Fox is contemplating a stronger streaming service. They have to be.
Yeah.
And it says it in one of these columns we have sitting.
Yeah, no, they definitely was part of it was a bullet point in their messaging around these.
It was. Yeah. Right. It was. And again, this is, Tubi. To be honest, I don't think I've ever once in all my years ever even one time hopped over to Tubi.
One thing I've noticed is that now basically all TVs are smart TVs, and these Tubis and all of these sort of Freevee, I think was Amazon's version. They come embedded in the TV and they look
Yes.
like cable. So, and they sell ads on them. So if I just power on my Samsung frame, uh, great TV by the way, and I think they're on sale right now.
I have all
Um,
Samsungs in this house as well.
if you get I don't because I never stay long enough. I should probably investigate it because it's like it's basic. They're providing you basic cable through your smart TV, and that's just another place they can. And they might, and just like you might have channel surfed when you were like 24 looking for old reruns of the A Team or the bowling league championship or whatever kind of crap you would kind of sift through on a Saturday afternoon on cable. They've kind of rebuilt that with these freebies things that just basically become the default free TV embedded on televisions.
I mean, myself, I've never done it because I have cable, so I don't need to do any of
Right.
these.
So
Any of these
now if you
things.
just had your smart Samsung plugged into the wall and through your internet router, and you can get to the Super Bowl
Well, I'll
without
give you
cable.
an example. The my home office does not have a cable plug on the wall because the house was not constructed with a cable plug. So the TV in that room is streaming only. So I turn on my Samsung Start TV, and then I skip over the Tubi and all these other streaming app buttons, and I go to the Xfinity app button, and it brings up my Xfinity subscription streaming. It's the same exact thing as what you're talking about. And so
Yeah.
we've talked about this many times. I mean, that's the future.
You might be able to ditch. I mean, that that's what and the way they do the user design,
Well, I like cable. I'm not going to ditch it because I just subscribe to all these things. I'm not doing that.
but I'm just saying they just put the design on this puts it so front and center. That's when the TV pops on. So it's like they're going for captured audience. So the other one, Disney, they had similar results. Boosted. They said the ESPN. The article by the same group, same writers. Disney Sports Division, led by ESPN, was flat in revenue at 4.85 billion, but segment operating income reversed from 103 million loss in the comparable period a year ago to 247 million gain. The company is now projecting a 13% bump in operating income for the sports division during the current fiscal year. So, now some of the numbers are different, and actually some of the pathways to this are different, but the narrative is the exact same, which that both these companies are bragging about their flagship sports programming as giving them good quarterly reports.
Yeah, I think the macro takeaway to this, and we need to move on here. I didn't realize we've rambled on a long time. We need to get to the Ohtani thing because it's funny. Um, but I think Tubi is just a temporary solution for Fox.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
That's
a
the
bridge.
takeaway. Yeah, it's a bridge. There you go. It's like a bridge loan.
Yeah. So yeah, no shock. Sports is driving these companies. So talk about driving. We got to the end and the sentencing in the Ohtani gambling scandal. Although that's probably unfair of me to frame it that way. Matsuhara, right?
It's
That's the trainer.
Ohtani related.
Yes. Well, it's his money.
Ohtani adjacent.
Yeah. Um, his former interpreter has been sentenced to 57 months, I think, basically
Yeah.
close to the equivalent of 5 years.
Yeah. So if you guys recall, the story was that for about 5 seconds, the world thought Shohei Ohtani was a massive gambling addict. And then what was revealed was that his longtime interpreter, a guy named Ippei Mizuhara, was stealing money from his accounts because he had full access to everything about Otani's life somehow. And just don't do that, kids, just for the record. Um, so he had been charged with a massive amount of federal crimes, and he's gotten a 57-month sentence. Now, why 57 months, you ask? Well, I haven't studied the specifics of it, this particular case, but the federal sentencing guidelines are very specific and objective. It's not like state court where the judge has a range he can sentence, within, not below this and not above this. In the federal sentencing guidelines, it's if you have this charge that means this for this amount, then you will be assigned X number of months. And so what has happened here is all of Shohei Mitsuhara's convictions equal 57 months, and that's why he's stuck with it. That's why you don't want to be in federal criminal court, kids. So his quote was, "I want to say I'm very truly sorry to Mr. Ohtani for what I have done."
I bet you
Famous
are.
last words.
Uh, the the amount of money here is staggering to me. That
$17 million.
in a relatively short amount of time.
How did even a guy as rich as Ohtani not know that?
Well, I really found one of the judge's statements, which is kind of buried at the end of this article. Which do we
Oh,
cite
the
it?
article was ESPN Ippei Mizuhara sentenced for 57 months for stealing from Shohei Ohtani by Tisha Thompson, dated February 6th.
So I think it's right at the end of the article. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeff Mitchell told the court that when Mitsuhara began stealing from Ohtani in 2021, the Japanese superstar only earned $250,000 from the Los Angeles Angels, and then Mitchell went on to be quoted as saying, Mitsuhara stole almost half of everything Ohtani made with the Angels. So, like, we think of Ohtani as, and he made money in Japanese, so he was no pauper. But when this theft began, he was getting like, the kind of like entry level Major League Baseball deal. So it wasn't like he waited until the South, I mean, Mitchell says half of his Angels earnings were probably stolen from him. So this happened when you could conceivably have noticed easier.
Well, I would assume that Ohtani probably had a massive signing bonus
Yeah.
because what it
And money
says,
from playing in Japan.
right? But this is, I mean, I'm stunned at the level at which Ohtani was not paying attention to his financing. Granted, there's a language barrier and everything, but I'm assuming there's a
This was his
way.
translator.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how do you not notice you lose that much money? Because this is literally cash out of a checking account, like
Right.
bank accounts.
This was pretty direct, like pay in, pay out paper trail.
It's not complicated.
No.
This is Mitsuhara accessing Otani's accounts and withdrawing money.
Right. It's
And
not a bunch of hidden honeypots and stuff.
it's not like the laundering money through the chicken restaurant or whatever. This is literally just, I'm taking this money and he's never going to notice, and he never did for what, 4 years,
Yeah.
3 years. It's incredible. This is how not to be a professional athlete. How about that? Don't be this um ignorant about your own finances.
And now he's on hook for, I mean, he'll never, I mean, there's no
No,
world in which he can pay
Mitsuhara,
this out.
yeah, there's, he's got to have repay all this money, and there'll be a court order that says he has to, and he never will, obviously, unless
I
he
was
steals
almost
money from someone else.
Yeah, I was almost daydreaming. What could he possibly do to even scratch himself to part of being
Well,
able to pay
okay,
that
you want a
much?
scenario? I'll give you one, and we're running out of time here, but Jordan Belfort. Okay, so Jordan Belfort was the subject of the Leonardo DiCaprio movie. What was it called?
Oh, the run as fast as you can or whatever.
Yeah, no, Jordan Belfort. It was the
The check forger.
Wolf of Wall Street
Oh,
guy.
okay. I was thinking of the check
So the Wolf
forger
of
guy.
Wall Street. No, not him. The Wolf of Wall Street guy um, defrauded millions and millions and millions of dollars from the public. He went way down, went to jail, lost everything, has a massive court order. He was able to sell his story to a book and a movie, and he's now and he made a lot of money from that. And so I think that Mitsuhara's only hope here is to somehow turn himself around. It's a lot easier for Jordan Belfort, who's from New Jersey. He's got a very vibrant personality, for lack of a better adjective. But I think if Mitsuhara wanted to sell his story and become sort of a more of a cultural icon in America again, that's the only way he could recover from. But being Japanese with the language barrier would be a lot harder in Belfort. But that's what I'm saying is Jordan Belfort went from the lowest of lows to a guy who all of a sudden is kind of back in terms of finances.
Yeah, that's the one. I came up with something similar, which was basically if there was enough of a market for whatever memoir or tell all or whatever here.
But the other one you're talking about, the other DiCaprio movie you're talking about is I can't remember the name of that one, but
fast as you can or something like
something
that.
like, so
Catch
that
me if
was
you can.
there you go, that's it. And so that was the story of a guy, a true story based on a true story of a guy who scammed everybody out of all kinds of stuff, and he ended up getting arrested, and then he ended up being working for the FBI.
Yeah, he became a G-man for the rest of his life, basically.
Right, but he sold his story to a book and a movie.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing as Belfort. So that's what Mitsuhara's out is. But he's Japanese; it'd be a lot harder to do.
Yeah, I think you'd almost have to have it. You'd almost have to. Your first sale would have to be the Japanese market, and then if that was successful, they'd translate it and it would expand.
Well, and there's a lot of cultural honor things in Japan that
right. Then I
Americans
was going
don't
to say that
understand.
that's a hard.
Yeah.
In some ways, that would make the most sense and the most, but I think his crimes are way more heinous in a Japanese context than
because there's no honor to it.
Yeah, right. So he's screwed.
I think he's screwed. Yeah. When he gets out in 5 years, he's going to have to go do God knows what.
Yeah. They're just going to dock his ridiculous wages for the
Welcome
rest of
to
his
McDonald's. May I help you?
Yeah. What? Jeez Louise, dude. Get control of yourself.
Yeah, what an addiction. My God.
Yeah, crazy. All right. Well, that brings us
I think he contributed to half of the gambling rise all by himself in the past couple of years.
Right. Yeah. Right. take Ohtani's money out of the gambling system.
It's just a level.
We can track that dip. All right, Steve. Have you guys started to get into your positional breakdowns yet?
This weekend is reserved for me to sit down and figure out the schedule for the rest of the offseason. But we will get into the free agency, the position group breakdowns, and the draft previews all coming up. And everybody's waiting on me to sit down and figure it out. So I promise I'd do it this weekend.
The Myles Garrett watch.
Yeah, right. So you can see all of that as well as our post Super Bowl coverage on the Hog Sty.
All right. And we will see you in 2 weeks.